Well, hi CES. Great to be here. My name is Robin Raskin. I'm the founder of Solving for Tech, and I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees for the CTA Foundation. This conversation is part of the CTA Foundation's CES interview series, and I feel really lucky, and you will too, because I'm about to introduce you to Martin Cooper. Martin Cooper is widely recognized as the father of the cell phone. And I usually don't say people's ages, but Martin was born in 1928 in Chicago. So think back. He built in the 1972 and 73, built the first mobile cell phone, made the first mobile cell phone call that the world ever heard. And just as interesting, his career continues to this day with his wife, Arlene Harris, with numerous patents and inventions that have helped all of us not just be mobile, but age with grace. So it's great to invite Martin Cooper on stage. Hey, Marty.
Hi, Robin, great to be here, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. And some of it may even be true.
Well, you have to tell us about this book that you wrote in your spare time, and I know it's coming out shortly. Tell us a little bit about the book and what you thought about, what caused you to sit down and write your memoirs.
Well, if I could do the commercial first, the book is called Cutting the Cord, The Cell Phone Transformed Humanity. And the book is really about, first of all, the introduction of the cell phone, because most people don't realize it, but not for the efforts of Motorola and my team, the cellular phone, as we understand it, might not even be in existence, or it would have come perhaps 10 or 20 years later. Nobody's told that story, and that's part of what's in the book. But I also talk a lot about what the cell phone is doing for humanity today. And most people don't realize that. They think the smartphone is what is important in the world, and that's not at all true. It's what's happening in undeveloped countries where the smartphone is actually moving people out of poverty and offering them medical services that they couldn't have otherwise. And then the book closes with what I think is going to happen in the future, because I think that the smartphone and the cell phone as we have it today is suboptimal. We're just at the beginning of the revolution that cell phones are going to introduce.
I love the line that I've heard you say often, where you say, we still call it a phone, and it's so much more than a phone.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask you to go back to the 70s. And so you're at Motorola. There's this other little company called AT&T, right? And Bell Labs. And they had a very different idea about what portability should be like. So why don't you describe that whole scenario for us?
Sure. Well, AT&T was the biggest company in the world. Motorola was a billion-dollar company that was absolutely tiny compared to AT&T. And the AT&T Bell Laboratories had come up with the idea in 1946, if you could imagine, that there is a way of offering communication, personal communications, in a more efficient way than occurred before that. And their view of personal communications was car telephones. And by 1960 or 69, they decided, well, we're going to do something about it. Took them 30 years to get to that stage. It gives you an idea how slow monopolies go. If you haven't figured it out by now, I'm not crazy about monopolies, Robin.
I would have never known that. Yeah.
So in 1969, they announced that they were going to make this new technology, cellular technology. And for 100 years, they had required us to use the copper wire if we wanted to communicate. And now they were going to trap us in our cars. So we still didn't have really mobile communications. We at Motorola believed the time was ready to have handheld telephones. And so we took the Bell system on. And by the way, I have to remind you, this is the 1960s and 1970s were really primitive. I mean, we didn't have the personal computer. We didn't have digital cameras. The internet had just been invented. The transistor had just been invented. So we were really pushing the state of the art, but we thought the time was ready for portables. The issue was to be decided by the Federal Communications Commission. And we spent years as practically the only people supporting this idea of handheld personal communications, because that's what people really need and want. The Bell System did a study, and their study said that the worldwide market for car telephones, that's their version of cell phone, was there going to be 900,000 cell phones in the world. Well, it turns out they were right. That the maximum number of cell phones for cars that ever happened was about 900,000. As you know, there are now more cell phones than people in the world. There are a little over 7.5 billion people in the world. There are probably 10 billion cell phones, but about between 5 and 5.5 million people in the world have cell phones today. Very different vision than Bell had.
Such an aha moment that people really want to be portable and take their phones with them. So describe this phone for people that don't know what the early Motorola phone looked like. Oh, there he goes.
This is the model of the very first cell phone. As you can see, the thing was huge. A big hunk of it was battery in the back, because this is ancient battery technology. For techies, it was a nickel cadmium battery. The phone weighed 2.5 pounds. That was the battery life was 20 minutes. That was not a problem because you couldn't hold up this phone for more than 20 minutes. So, but this is what the phone looked like. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, and I remember it wasn't inexpensive either. It cost $3,000.
It took 10 years from the time we made that first phone call for the first commercial phone, which didn't look very different than this. It was, we had gotten the weight down to a little over a pound. The battery life was up to an hour, but the phone, as you point out, Robin, cost $4,000. This is $1983, which would be equivalent to buying a cell phone today for $10,000. So it was expensive. And in 1983, the service was really expensive. But pretty much, if you use your phone a lot, it costs you $100 a month just for voice.
Wow.
And it almost didn't happen.
Yeah. And it's not just a phone, it's the infrastructure that surrounds the phone and the regulatory issues, and you had to go through all of that. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of this device on the world. And I know you have some really strong ideas about how the world changed because they held a phone in their hands.
Well, the most rewarding part of that is what happened in Africa. Just because of the impact of the cell phone, in the sense that people now could move money around, could operate more efficiently. There are studies made that say that 1.2 billion people, 1.2 billion, that's 4 times the population of the United States, moved out of severe poverty in Africa over the last 20 years or so. And the biggest cause of that was, in fact, the introduction of the cell phone. So just think about that kind of impact and the misery that the cell phone resolved. And of course, similar things happened in other countries. Now, the other thing that's happening now, and that has occurred in the last 10 years or so, is that people in rural areas in places like India and Mexico are now getting medical service that they could not have ever hoped for in the past. As an example, there's a little device that costs less than $5 if you clip on a cell phone. And in a remote village in Mexico, a doctor in Mexico City can do an eye examination and offer medical services that were impossible before. And a similar device can be used to do an ultrasound on a pregnant woman, also in a remote village, with a very inexpensive adjunct to the cell phone, and again with a doctor in the city doing that. It is just a marvelous achievement.
Oh, absolutely. Banking, education in remote corners of the world. I mean, what the cell phone has done, created entrepreneurs and full industries in small cities and countries all over the world. So it's quite a door opener, and yet we still face so many different challenges with the cell phone. And you talk a lot about it being still very nascent in its evolution, that we're going to see so many iterations. And yet today's smartphone is like walking around with a full powered computer, supercomputer in your pocket. So where do you see us going from here?
Well, the cell phone today really is suboptimal. It tries to do all things for all people with one device. And of course, the consequence of that is that none of the things that he does are optimal. And the best example is I can take my cell phone out, and here I've got this flat piece of plastic, which I put against my round shaped head. So even that is suboptimal. And the fact that you're trying, everybody in the world is different. Every person in the world is different from every other person. And here we are telling them that everybody's got to have exactly the same thing. You know that's wrong. And what's going to happen in the future is the phone is going to be personalized to you. You're going to have your own phone. The idea that a human being can take this universal phone and select out of 2 million applications, the ones that are right for them, now that's kind of silly, because what you will have in the next generation of phones, 10 years, 15 years from now, is an artificial intelligence in a phone that will know you, know your habits, know what your needs are, and it will find an application for you. Or if necessary, this artificial intelligence will create one that optimizes your experience. So the cell phone for people is going to become very different. And the second thing is that it turns out what's right for people, the ability to move around, to be flexible, to be free, freedom, is true for industry as well. And there's this new thing called 5G, which doesn't do very much for people, does practically nothing for people. But for industry, it is going to create a whole new world that ultimately will result in products and lower price products than we could have imagined before. So the revolution, the cell phone revolution, even though the cell phone's over 40 years old, is just beginning now. In the next 20, 30 years, the things that are happening are going to be extraordinary.
I could ask you a million questions, but because we're talking to the CTA Foundation, whose mission is to make technology accessible to both an aging population and the disabled populations, how has the cell phone, and where do you see this going? We saw it in the pandemic with the elderly Venmoing and Zooming and doing things I think they never imagined. What gives you hope that this will continue?
Well, first of all, the COVID pandemic, you could hardly say that there's anything very good about the pandemic, but it has accelerated the use of a whole bunch of things that we have not experienced before. One of them is the Zoom thing, that we are becoming very accustomed to talk to each other as Robin and I are talking to all of you at this moment. And so the people that really, after COVID is gone, let's hope that happens sooner rather than later, there are people that are going to now have access to communication, to the comfort that comes out of being able to talk to other people And that's going to be a whole new experience for them. And that's one of the things that my wife and I are doing with a new venture that we're starting. Since I've already done a commercial for my book, I'm not going to do a commercial for this new thing. But we are looking to create experiences where elderly people can sit in the isolation that we have imposed upon them, in whether they're in senior homes or even in their own homes, and let them communicate with other people, to share experiences, and to do that the way you and I are doing it. And in order to do that, you really have to have wireless broadband everywhere. And it turns out that that is happening at the moment. Uh, Less than half of seniors have that capability. And I'm working very hard on them on an FCC advisory committee, trying to make the FCC and other people understand that it's important that everybody have access to wireless broadband service. And that has to do not only with seniors, but the whole educational system is going to depend in the future on wireless broadband, and medical services will. We have the potential of not only extending human life, of minimizing disease, but of eliminating disease by virtue of measuring things on your body, using the cell phone to transmit that information so that we know you're going to get sick before you get sick.
Yep.
And if you do that, you can zap the sickness and stop you from getting sick in the first place. So all these things are going to benefit not only seniors, but all of humanity.
Well, you are so great to talk to. I could do this for hours, but I know our time is running out. So I urge our audience, as you walk through the CES virtual exhibits this year, to really know that you are talking to the guy who started so much of what these innovations that you will see in 2021 are built on. So Marty Cooper, thank you so much. It is always an honor and a pleasure, and we can't wait to get our books. They'll be out in January. I'll do the plug.
Yeah, my pleasure, Robin. Great to talk to you.